welcome back to PyLadies Con 2025. My name is Kalyan and I'll be your host today. I'm super excited to introduce our next talk, which is Public Relations for Data Teams: How to Increase Impact by Building Trust by Maggie Wolff. Maggie is a marketer turned data scientist with experience spanning multiple industries, including tech, e commerce, travel, corporate real estate, healthcare, and nonprofits. Let's hear more from Maggie on this incredible topic. Maggie, the stage is all yours now.
Welcome to my talk, Public Relations Tips for Data Analytics Teams: How to Increase Your Impact by Building Trust and Credibility. I'm Maggie Wolff, and while I am currently a data scientist and have been working in analytics and data science for almost a decade, I started my career working in public relations and marketing. And many of the things that became second nature to me while working in PR and marketing are very helpful for me now working in analytics and data science. So I want to share some of those tips with you all today. So before I jump into the tips, I want to talk about why public relations matters for data teams. So one thing you may have experienced is a lack of action. You delivered a great analysis, but then nothing changed in the business, and it left you wondering why you're doing this work at all. And then there is a lack of visibility. Other teams or leadership have no idea what you can do, what you're capable of, and this can limit the opportunities for collaboration and more impact for you or your team. And then there's the lack of trust. I've seen very smart analysts just jump straight into their analysis in their presentation, and that leaves their audience questioning if they understand their world or the business context of the problem they're solving. And then finally, a lack of understanding. If you're not tailoring your presentation for your audience, your delivery might be too technical or too advanced for your team. They're not able to digest what they're saying or act on your recommendations, and you might not get buy-in. So one thing that's very important, and this kind of gets to the heart of public relations, is to keep it human and remember that behind every data point is someone making a decision. Everything you do, every insight, every recommendation, ultimately it is for someone to make a decision. And so you really need to align your delivery with how your audience thinks and what they care about and how they make decisions. So think about what moves them. Frame your recommendations by how it can help them succeed in their role. I like to think about the idea of making your audience the hero of your story, the story of your data analysis and your insights. And so they're the hero. So think about what is important to your hero and how can you help them succeed. And then show the impact and show the outcomes in the metric that they really care about. When in doubt, this is often going to be a revenue-based metric, but speak their language in terms of what, again, moves them. And then create a safe space. So I think it's really easy for data analysts and data scientists to want to come off as very intelligent and smart, and they will give this really high-level technical presentation with a lot of advanced terms. And unfortunately, what this does is make your audience feel like they are not smart enough for what you're trying to say, and then they don't feel comfortable asking questions or giving feedback. So make sure that you are creating a safe space for them to do so. Make sure that you are, speaking their language, using terms they understand, and that they will be comfortable speaking up because you want this to be a collaboration. Again, they're your hero. And to support this, use relatable analogies. Make sure you're translating complex concepts into simple language. And I have some examples on how you can do that. So instead of talking about, A/B testing, hypothesis testing, experimentation, just say this is the predicted outcome if we make this change. Or instead of saying sample size, which we know to us is a very specific technical term that they might not be familiar with. So just say that we have enough data to determine that the outcome isn't random. And then don't say regression because that word might mean something else to your audience. Just say, if we change X, it'll impact Y positively or negatively. And so kind of furthering along the idea of knowing your audience. So really thinking about what does this audience care about and how will they use this information to make better decisions? So if you're talking to executives, they really care about, ROI, return on investment. They care about the business impact. They care about making the decisions. They move fast. They don't have a lot of time. Just tell them what to do. Really focus more on your outcomes and the decisions and recommendations that you're making, and really think about how they should prioritize resources like budget and time, because that's what they're doing. They're making decisions to do those things. So focus on the business impact, financial implications, and clear recommendations. Then think about your business partners. Again, the idea, make them the hero. You're doing work to support them. So think about what impacts their work and their goals. Make sure you're using, plain language they understand. Use clear visuals that they can digest and come to the same conclusions that you're coming to by looking at those visuals. So, keeping everything simple and easy to understand. Make sure you connect your findings to their challenges. Make sure, you show that you understand their world and that you're trying to help solve these challenges and solve these problems. And then provide actionable next steps that they can own, because ultimately they will. So make sure it's something that they can do. And then when you're presenting to your analytical peers, this is where you can be very technical. This is where they want to know your methodology and your assumptions, and they want to learn. So this is where you can provide those technical details, those limitations, those alternative methods that you didn't pursue as your final deliverable. Make sure, you can share your reproducible methodologies that your peers and colleagues can take to their own projects. And then also you can share insights that can apply to their area of your work. And then a really important idea in public relations is this idea of building relationships. So you want to show that you are on the same team. You're not just the person who drops in with data to show that their project has failed. I think, unfortunately, a lot of data teams, they kind of just become the person who shows up with data that may or may not tell the story that the audience wants to hear. And then that's it. That's all they've done. And so they kind of become this negative Nancy who is kind of raining on their parade. And you don't want to do that. You want to show that you're on the same team, because if you are working for the same company, theoretically, you are aligned to the same business objectives and goals, and their success is your success. So you want to really build that relationship to show that you're on the same team. So make sure you take time to understand their world. You understand their objectives, their challenges, their limitations, and make sure you demonstrate that you are invested in their success, that you feel that their success helps your success, because again, you're all part of the same company. And so you can ask questions like, what are your priorities or roadblocks? Or when they come to you with a problem, ask if they can share the context. You want to make sure you're solving the right problem and you understand the business context. And then ask, what information do you need to make the best decision? Because again, at the end of the day, you're helping to enable decision making. And so just be straightforward. Ask them, what do you need to know? And then make sure you are being collaborative, not critical. So instead of just coming in and showing, the failings, frame it as the opportunities. This is less judgmental, and show that, again, you share their goals. You want them to succeed. So let's learn together. And so making it more of a collaborative conversation instead of just you delivering your insights and delivering the data, but more something where you can come to conclusions together. And then that's going to get more buy-in, they're going to be more receptive from it. So instead of just delivering and shoving all of your findings at them, kind of share the data and maybe save your conclusions. First, ask them, what patterns do you see? Ask what do you think is driving this? What do you think we should do next? Maybe they'll come to the exact same conclusions you did, and fantastic, that's great. You can point that out. Or maybe they point out things you hadn't thought of, and all the better. Now you have a richer, better analysis and recommendations. And then finally, offer solutions and support. So don't just find the issues, don't just find the problems, find the data that says, you did this wrong or that wrong. Suggest the next steps. So position yourself as a resource to help achieve goals. And so ask, which next steps are achievable? What would be the most impactful? What do you need to make that happen? And then furthering with the relationship, you want to think about balancing simplicity and transparency. So this can make your work more digestible and more understandable, and they'll be more likely to trust you and want to follow through on your recommendations. So making sure you're using plain language. So replacing jargon and technical concepts with practical terms. Again, some more examples at the bottom. So instead of saying, our regression models show that these coefficients, blah, 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 you can say, if we increase X, the impact on Y will be Z. Much easier to understand. Instead of saying the statistical significance shows a p-value at negative or at less than 0.05, like they don't understand p-value, and they might not understand that statistical significance is, a specific term we use. So just say we're confident this result isn't due to random chance. And instead of saying these two variables have a correlation coefficient of 0.73, you can just say there's a strong positive relationship between these factors. When this one goes up, that one goes up. Next is the idea of acknowledging limitations. So we know that the data that we work with isn't perfect. There are, there's missing data, there's messy data, whatever. It's important to acknowledge these limitations only when it could impact decision making. This can help build trust and could prevent costly mistakes. So, for example, if you're doing, a customer analysis, and for whatever reason there's a segment of your customers that is left out, you just don't have that data available, then when you're presenting your customer analysis, make sure you point out, unfortunately, these customers weren't included, and so we can't come to the same conclusions with that group of customers. And then that might be important for the teams that maybe work with those customers, that they're not using the incorrect conclusions. But you want to make sure that you're not drowning in caveats. You don't want to include every single caveat you come across if it doesn't really impact the outcome. Really focus on what matters for the decision at hand or the problem you're solving. Because, to bring me to the tip in the bottom corner, you don't want to say anything in your presentation that an audience can latch onto. Anything you put in a slide, anything you bring up when you're delivering a presentation is fair game for them to ask questions or want to dig into further. And if you have something that's maybe not something you want to focus on, you run the risk of derailing your conversation. And suddenly you're focusing on this little caveat that really wasn't all that important anyway, but it's leading to this 10-minute conversation during a 20-minute presentation. So save all those things for the appendix, not for your actual presentation. Next is the idea of building in public. And this is really important for building trust and also improving and gaining more visibility. So you want to let your audience see your process. So you want to share with them what are the steps you're going to take to solve this problem from the ideation to the output. And they might, sharing this might lead to feedback that maybe you're missing something or maybe there's something you're not thinking of. Or it can just, again, help build transparency. And then also share the data and methodologies used. You don't have to dig in and go into detail, but just letting them know, this is what I'm trying. Again, it helps with the transparency. It helps them feel involved and included. And then make sure you're sharing progress updates. Sometimes you can get a little way into your project and you actually have solved the problem. So this can save you time. It can also, to my next point, help you understand when you need to be agile and pivot. And consider hosting a learning session like a brown bag lunch to improve their data literacy. Next, you want to include their input where it makes sense. So ask for their insights into helping you define a metric or defining an audience. You might want to include them on a data governance board or a definition review just to make sure you don't have any blind spots. And then another thing is brainstorming assumptions and hypotheses is really insightful and can lead to a lot of interesting projects and help you understand where their mind is at. And then providing peer review opportunities for their tests and analysis, you can see what other teams are doing and it can help make sure your process is good. And then finally, sharing demos. So sharing the work that you can share publicly within your team at a regular interval, maybe monthly, you're sharing, a new dashboard, a new metrics, a new analysis, and how they were created. This can build transparency, but it can also lead to additional work from other teams now that they know what you're able to do. And then finally, be your own publicist. So these are literally things that we did in public relations and marketing, and you can do them to get visibility for your team. So if there are team channels on Slack or whatever chat program your company uses, make sure you're posting updates about your team and your successes. You can also talk about these things in your internal newsletters. If the teams you support are talking about projects, make sure you're included and you can write your context. You can also write about the projects that you're doing. And then you can also talk about these things at all hands, team or company all hands, share your success stories, share your examples of your work, use these as opportunities to kind of get more visibility. And then think about positioning yourself as a thought leader. If your company has an external tech blog or LinkedIn page, you can talk about some of the projects that you're doing. So in conclusion, the key takeaways are, think about your audience, think about, remember they're the hero. So tailor your presentation to what they value and how they're going to use your insights to make decisions. Make sure you're really taking the time to build trust, establish credibility, and really understand the business that you're supporting. And then make sure your insights are actionable, that you're not just reporting, but you're also making recommendations so they know what to do next. And then work to gain visibility by sharing your team's success through different channels that your company has available. So thank you. That is my presentation. Like I said, I'm a data scientist. I'm also a content creator, mentor, and community builder with Women in Data Science and Measure Camp. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out with any questions, and let me know if these tips were helpful for you.
Maggie, that was really insightful and amazing session. And especially I like the key points you have touched upon, that human behind the work and also building trust around it, which are really crucial and important points in your talk. Once again, thank you so much for sharing the knowledge with us. And folks, if you have more questions around this topic, feel free to drop it in the Discord channel. See you all in the next talk.